All right, thank you all so much for joining us today, either virtually or in person. My name is Jesse Whelan. I'm the Associate Director at the Office of National Fellowships. We also have a few members from the ONF team, if you all would like to introduce yourselves as well.
I'm Bonnie Garcia Glockner. I'm the Assistant Director.
My name is Christine Perry. I'm the Graduate Assistant here at ONF.
And so today, before I introduce Michael, or I'll let you introduce yourself, we're going to be talking about a lot of different language fellowship opportunities to hopefully fund an international experience. At the Office of National Fellowships, we work with a host of different fellowships, so this is just a bit of a drop in the bucket. But a lot of the fellowships that we're going to talk about today intersect with a lot of the other experiences that we work at. And so in a one-on-one meeting, we can kind of talk more about your interests and how this connects to your studies here at Florida State or your involvement in the community or what you might like to do either in graduate school or later in your career. And so we're very lucky enough to have Michael Sapple here today to talk to us. And so would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
So Michael Sapple, I work at the Institute of International Education. Our big program is Fulbright. We also do the Gilman and the Boren Award, which is the one I've been working on for the longest in the 18 years I've been at II.
Yeah, and so Michael's going to be able to elaborate on a lot of the different fellowships that we talk about today. And so some of the major ones, at least the major ones when it comes to language study, the most recognizable names are going to be the Critical Language Scholarship and the Boren Awards. And so if you're an undergraduate student, that would be the Boren Scholarship. If you're a graduate student, it's going to be the Boren Fellowship. And there are some nuances that I'm sure Michael will be able to elaborate on a little bit later. And so starting with the Boren Awards, and so this is an opportunity to provide funding for anywhere up to, I believe it's 8 weeks if you're a STEM major, or anywhere up to 6 months or a full year of study abroad, as long as your program is focused on language study. And so the Boren initiative is to support U.S. national security efforts abroad. And that is an extremely diverse and nuanced definition of national security. I've worked with students that have talked about it from a public health perspective to a humanitarian efforts, so where you can make it very unique to your major and what you're studying at Florida State, or it's something that you could adapt to what you're hoping to do in your career, where you're hoping to work, or for future research that you might be wanting to do. But this exists in many different continents. I mean, well, I think almost everyone but Antarctica, I would assume. But yeah, and so this could be uniquely adapted to your language and academic interests. One of the main focuses, and Michael, I'll have you elaborate a little bit more on this, is so in the Boren application, we're not just going to be talking about the language that you're wanting to study and where you're hoping to studying it and why, but the application really asks you to dig deep into your future plans. And so specifically, there is a one-year requirement to work for the federal government after the completion of your Boren Award, but you do have some say in where you would like that to be and what you would like to be doing. And so, Mike, would you like to elaborate on that specific requirement for Boren?
So there's two different things we must think about: your application career trajectory and your real life career trajectory. The Boren Award is funded by the Department of Defense. So we are defense forward. We are looking at national security, but we are looking at national security in a broad range. So national security can be traditional, military, in international relations, the typical things you think about when you think of national security. National security can also be food resources. It can be migration. It can be immigration. It can be all sorts of different things. It could be environmental. Although we have 4 areas of the federal government that we prefer students to talk about in their application, our preferred agencies, we would also put USAID underneath State Department there. You could work for the Peace Corps and count toward your Boren service. You do not have to, when it comes to working for the feds, end up working in the CIA. You can, but we are everywhere from CIA to Peace Corps and everything in between. So as long as it has a national security implement to it or some sort of component to it, it's going to count toward your service. And that even includes contractors. I'm a government contractor. I work for the IIE. We are not a federal agency. I am in a nonprofit. My paycheck shows that completely. The idea here, though, if I was a Boren, doing what I'm doing today, talking about a government funded program through the DoD would count for my service as well. So there are a lot of ways to skin that cat. So I don't want you to think if you're not interested in these 4, don't worry, there are a lot more opportunities out there. But when it comes to a competitive application, we definitely want to say, all right, what is it that you are interested in? And is there something within these mega agencies? DHS, Department of Homeland Security alone has thousands of different types of jobs, right? So there are a lot of opportunities where you can say, I want to be a Peace Corps volunteer when I leave college. When I get back from Peace Corps, I would look at jobs within State Department or within USAID, because that is generally what I would be doing in Peace Corps anyway. So you kind of make that transition. So a lot of opportunities out there. It's 12 months service requirement, but for the most part, when you apply, you're going to show this long-term interest in government work. So I'm interested in being in a foreign service officer. Maybe I want to work in an embassy somewhere around the world. You're showing a long-term interest in federal work. That is going to be the most competitive application.
Absolutely. And so a lot of the fellowships that we work with, whether it's Boren, CLS, Fulbright, or many others, are going to ask you in one way or another to articulate your career aspirations. Boren has a little bit more of a vested interest in what that looks like, and so we'll make sure that we really flesh that out. But the website is also a really great resource to use that breaks down what these different departments offer. And so we can also scroll through that in a one-on-one meeting as well. The eligibility for Boren is pretty straightforward. You need to be a US citizen, but for the Boren Scholarship, you need to complete this opportunity before you graduate. And so we've worked with students in their first year, they apply as freshmen, and then they travel abroad during their sophomore year. I've also worked with graduating seniors that may be graduating during the summer, or, but we can work with you, and we can work with the registrar's office to make sure that the Boren experience can be viewed as more of a gap year experience while you're still an enrolled student. And then once the Boren experience concludes, we can post your diploma and you officially graduate, but you'll still be able to walk with your peers just like you would if you're graduating just normally. And we need to make sure that the program that you're participating in is eligible for a Boren Fellowship. And so again, on the website, you'll be able to see which countries are labeled green or labeled blue. And would you like to talk a little bit about like eligibility for countries?
Sure. So for the most part, Boren does not go to Western Europe, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, anywhere in the US. I shouldn't have to say that, I have to. Those are the countries Boren doesn't go to. Most of the reason there is we're trying to get you, similar to a CLS, we're looking for competitive languages and not often studied areas of the world. Most students in the US don't study abroad. It's only 12%. We are trying to grab those folks that already are thinking about study abroad and saying, hey, instead of going to Western Europe, where you all like to go to England, Germany, France, and Italy, right? And Canada and Australia, New Zealand, we're not going there because most of you already do that. We have enough people who do that. We're trying to get you to go a little bit to the east, go to Hungary, go to Poland, go to Serbia, wherever it is, right? Where you're trying to get people to go to different parts of the world. Right now, the most popular countries are Taiwan, China. We're looking at Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, because we're not currently going to Russia. We're looking at South Korea, Japan. These are our top, Jordan, and these are our top countries and languages. So there are a lot out there. When looking at our map, you'll see, if you go to our borenawards.org, if you're curious and you say, okay, I'm interested in this country, but I don't understand why is it purple or white, and I'm not sure what the color means, why is it blue? Ask us. Boren@iie.org. In fact, I can give you a lot of information. One of the benefits of Boren is we don't get a lot of applications. This program gives a lot of funding, up to $25,000. We get very few applications compared to a Gilman or a CLS. One of the benefits of that is that I don't have that many students asking me questions. So if you are an applicant, you can easily get 15 minutes with me on Zoom, and we will talk through whatever question you have. And I'm happy to do it. That is not something you will find on most programs. This is an opportunity for you to bounce ideas off. I can't read your essays. That is not something I will do, although your campus rep will do that for you. But I can tell you, for example, hey, I'm interested in going to Ghana. Where do you want to go? You're the only one I don't know where you want to go.
Maybe like Turkey.
Turkey. So you want to study Turkish. Right, we haven't been sending people to Turkey recently, for Erdogan reasons, but we are sending people to Azerbaijan to study Turkish. And we have two different ways you can do that. this 15 minutes, we could talk about, or with your campus rep, and say, what are the pluses and minuses of applying to our Turf League program, which is a funded program that we run, versus doing a program that FSU is running. There are going to be pluses and minuses depending on what your situation is, but I can go through that with you. If you aren't doing our official program, what programs have Boren been doing in Azerbaijan? I think it's in Baku. And the idea is like, okay, these are programs that Boren have done in the past. You can look into that. You may not know any of these programs. I don't know them necessarily until I start looking for them. So I'll have a student say, yeah, I'm interested in Ghana, or I'm interested in South Korea. Where have Boren gone recently? Because then I can start doing my research. Generally speaking, though, a student, you'll just go to your study abroad office. You will talk to people here, find out what program are available to students here, and then ask Boren just to help fund it. That's generally speaking how most Boren do.
And just because I know we have a few students in attendance virtually that are graduate students, could you elaborate more on like the eligibility and what they're looking for the Boren Fellowship applicants?
So for the grad students or the graduating seniors, and it depends, I'd rather the graduating seniors stick to the scholarship, but you are eligible for the fellowship as well. But for the grad students, you will have to be matriculating while you're on the program. So when you're applying, you can't graduate before, you can't finish your master's or your PhD before you start your Boren. You have to still be in the program. And that seems like it's doable here at this campus. Not every school does that, be happy. But what we're looking for is language. Now, most graduate students don't go into their study abroad office and ask for a program, a traditional study abroad. Most graduate students are Legoing theirs together. They find a language program. They find maybe they're doing research overseas. They're doing some sort of internship at an NGO. They are cobbling this together and building a program. In the application, you lead with the language. You follow up with research if that's what you're doing. And you talk about the culture and everything else that you're gaining from the program, but you lead with the language versus a Fulbright where you lead with the research. So it depends on who know your audience. Boren is interested in the language. We're very interested in what you want to do in the federal government when you come back. So these are the two most important things you're going to talk about. And again, we can get into strategy once you decide to apply.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's any sentence that you write down from this, this is the very basic, like, okay, we're in the very pre-planning process of your application. But if you can determine how long, so if I would like to spend this many months, and like we said, it's anywhere from 2 up to a full year in this specific country to immerse myself in this language because I want to address this specific concern relative to US national security and my federal government career with. And if you can start filling in those gaps, I can guarantee you're going to have a very solid skeleton, because I guess we're entering spooky season, in order to be able to build and add some muscle and tissue and to really make this application a full, living, breathing, creepy, spooky guy. I don't know, but excuse my poor analogies. But moving on from here, so Boren understands that specifically for any STEM students that may be in attendance, that it can be much more difficult to find international experiences, to step out of the lab and to find things that are very relevant to what you're doing. And so if you're able to spend longer, by all means do so, but they do make accommodations for you to have a shorter length program. Is there anything for STEM students that you would like to elaborate on when it comes to those programs?
So STEM students get two bonuses in this application process. First of all, a STEM student as an undergrad gets the opportunity to study for 2 months. As a graduate student, it doesn't matter. Graduate students, 3 months or longer. The fellowship is minimum 12 weeks. But the undergrad STEMs can apply for a summer-only program. Those 8-week programs have to be over the summer, anything between 8 and 11 weeks. A STEM student is eligible to apply for a 12-month program if they want to. It is up to the STEM. Every school is different. Some STEM students, if you're an engineering major, may have prereq classes that prevent you from doing anything in the spring and the fall. That is why we have a STEM initiative for the summer. The other benefit for a STEM student is that if they are applying for a language like French or Spanish, instead of being required to have an advanced level of that language, the only 2 languages we have a prereq for are French and Spanish because they're already so well spoken and taught in this country. You can just debate whether that's true. A STEM student only has to have intermediate level of those 2 languages. So if you are a STEM who wants to do an 8-week program in Peru to study Spanish, you do not have to have advanced Spanish like we say all over the place on the website. Because you're a STEM student, you only need intermediate, basically a year, maybe a year and change of Spanish. If you took Spanish all through high school, you're probably fine. Most Spanish speakers, STEM or otherwise, study Portuguese. It's a preferred language. It's in a country that's preferred, Brazil. It's an easier sell to the committee, but STEM students are very popular. In fact, STEM students if we put them all in one major, they were the top performing last year in our application. Normally it's international relations are number one by a mile. This past year was STEM students, just beat out international relations for the first time ever. It was a weird COVID year, but still props to them. ROTC. The ROTC students, if you are in ROTC, especially if you are going to be in the military when you graduate, that is an easy win for Boren. So yeah, it's not easy, but basically the committee knows you're going to fulfill your service because you're going to be in the service. Military work is DoD work is one of our priority agencies. You will be there at minimum 4 years. So you are 4 times the amount you would have to do on a Boren. There are still strategies I would go into it if you apply to Boren that basically to distinguish yourself from other cadets who are applying. But they have a 49% success rate historically, cadets and folks who are veterans, US veterans have a 49% success rate. A normal Boren undergrad has about a 23-24% success rate depending on the year. And for a graduate student, the fellowship success rate is closer to, well, this past year was 47%, again, weird year, but in general, graduate students have a 33-38% success rate. So these, again, are, you know, I don't want to oversell it, but depending on what you're applying for, you have a better chance of getting the Boren than others. And those flagship students, if you happen to be in a flagship program, do you have a flagship program on campus?
Not on campus.
We don't even have to worry about that.
Yeah, but I think that's a really excellent segue because oftentimes when I'm meeting with students, they know exactly what the language they're studying, where they would like to go, how, you know, all the nuances of how this fits into their career. And usually one of the major hiccups is just how do I find a program? You know, I mean, Florida State does have it, and that's where I usually recommend that they start, is look at the resources that Florida State has through our international programs office or through our Center for Global Engagement. They have some excellent resources abroad in a lot of different countries. And even if there isn't an established program already, they have a lot of relationships with people they can reach out to help find an opportunity for you. But Boren does have some established programs already that you are more than welcome to choose from for a select number of languages. If you'd like to talk maybe a little bit more about those, I know that kind of gets in the way a little bit.
No worries. So I will say Portuguese is no longer on this list. That we removed that last year. But we have Flagship, which is the language flagship is a program separate from Flagship Language Initiative, which why we named them so close together, not my idea. But so we have something called FLEs, Flagship Language Initiatives, which is what we call them in our office. I'm not sure if anybody else does, but the FLIs are up for anyone can apply to a FLE. The FLEs are in Africa. We have 4 different countries that we target. It's Tanzania for Swahili, our most popular. Senegal for French, our second most popular. And again, French, you need intermediate level. You don't need advanced. Just intermediate for French for any student, not just STEM for this program. Then the other 2 languages in our African one, it's 3 languages. We have Wolof, also in Senegal, Akan Twi, which I'm probably not pronouncing right, in Ghana, and we have Zulu in South Africa. So that's our athlete program. Any of those languages you can apply through your normal chain. You can go through FSU and do your own program. We have our own programs should you be interested. Historically, you have a better opportunity of receiving a Boren if you apply to an athlete versus doing it on your own. It's about a 10% more percentage that you would get the award because we have fewer people applying to the FLEs than we do for a general award. That said, we have other flagships, which I don't know if you have any of those on this slide or another slide. We have 3 more flagships at University of Wisconsin. These flagships, by the way, these FLEs, Flagship Language Initiatives, the African Flagship Language Initiative is run out of University of Florida. So you'd have to go to Gainesville in the summer. I'm sorry, it's very hot, but you're in Tallahassee, so I'm not sure it's much different. The idea is you would do about 8 weeks in Gainesville next summer, studying one of those African languages, and then go overseas in the fall. Swahili and French, we have our own programs. The other 3 we would have to talk about. But Swahili and French, we have these programs in country. You would be basically the same people you're studying with in the summer from all around the country. You would all go together to that country to study as well. If we take all levels, absolute beginners, except for the French, absolute beginners to advanced speakers, we'll take everybody in between. For the other 3 languages we do this for, it's Indonesian in Indonesia, amazingly. That's called IFLI. We have our SAFLI, South Asian Flagship Language Initiative, that's for Hindi and Urdu. And we have TURFLI, which is our Turkish program, which one you probably would be interested, hopefully. All of those are at University of Wisconsin-Madison, although not as hot, giant mosquitoes. That's the biggest, and a lot of dairy, but giant mosquitoes. At University of Wisconsin-Madison, you will do you'll do that 8-week program in the summer of 2023, and then go overseas for you, if you did this, would be in Baku, Azerbaijan for a semester. These are language intensive programs. You're getting credit for them. You get a transcript from University of Florida for AFLI or University of Wisconsin for the other 3. You get a transcript from Bryn College, probably mispronouncing that, it's a Pennsylvania school. They are the facilitators of our overseas programs, so you will get credit for these. Whether they go toward your degree or not is not something I can answer, but you will at least get transcripts that you can keep for your records. And basically, this is cramming in about 2 years worth of language into a summer and a fall. Most of my students who do this, even when we were all virtual, which we were the last couple of years, the students who go in with 0 Swahili come out with intermediate mid. By the end, that's the average score, which is crazy. And these are very intense structured programs. If that's not your speed, if that's not something you want to do for any of those languages, apply to an FSU program. It's fine. But this is definitely something that is interesting. The IFLI and SAFLI programs alone have a well over 50% success rate. Actually, our IFLI was 73% this year. We only had 1 or 2 people who didn't get it.
Yeah.
So, and man, you can imagine that application.
Right.
So definitely, if you're interested in that, great. If not, if you want to apply to Turkey, you can. You will have to have a backup, as Azerbaijan as your backup anyway. But that is something we can talk about if you decide to apply.
Yeah. Another benefit of working with our office is that we have years worth of alumni who, many of which, one is actually currently doing this Turkish program. They just left Madison to go over to Azerbaijan. And so we would love to put you in contact with some of these alumni. They can tell you about their foreign experience. Now, when it comes to deadlines, we did set a December 1st deadline for both the scholarship and the fellowship. And that is because we're lucky enough to have a Boren faculty committee on campus, that all of which have agreed to review your applications, provide you feedback. And these are faculty that are either proficient in some of these languages or have studied some of these languages, or they have extensive experience abroad, or they are faculty in fields that traditionally draw a lot of foreign applicants. So it's a pretty eclectic group. And so by meeting this December 1st deadline, we're able to schedule a one-on-one interview where you're able to sit down, talk with them, they're able to give you feedback, and then express their endorsement for your application. And we'll be able to implement that feedback to meet that February 1st deadline. And so submit by December 1st, we'll schedule that, if not by the end of the fall, then at the very beginning of the spring, and then we'll go on from there. Does that all make sense to everyone? Cool.
I want to just real quick.
Yeah.
Whether you apply for CLS, Boren, the good news is it doesn't hurt to apply to everything usually. As long as you're eligible, we always recommend you apply to everything you can. Just make sure you don't send the same essay to everywhere, because different places want different things, right? But the idea is you should give yourself as many opportunities to get funding as possible. And if you're lucky enough, or just it works out where you are offered multiple awards, the Boren is basically will work with most programs. So if you get a Boren and you get a CLS, and you get a Gilman, and you get something else, basically just show us what funding isn't covered by the other one. And as long as it's something we would cover anyway, we'll give you the money for that. So if you get a CLS and they're covering your summer expenses, but you had planned to be 6 months overseas, we'll cover the next 3 months, or we'll cover the next 4 months, or we'll cover whatever CLS is not covering up to our cap, which is $12,500 for one semester, or $25,000 for a full year. So it's and when I say full year, I mean 25 weeks or more. So if you can do 6 months or more, you get full funding, up to full funding for the Boren.
Yeah, we can break down all these deadlines with you to let you know which we need to really prioritize right now. And we're kind of transitioning into one of those right now solely because it's due sooner. And that's the critical language scholarship. And so one of the reasons why Boren is such an attractive option for students is because of the length that you're able to stay in country, study the language, experience the culture. The critical language scholarship is for a much shorter duration, but I would say it doesn't lack in intensity. And so if you're looking for like a more like casual study abroad experience, this may not be the program for you. Because CLS really likes to build, like this opportunity is packed into 8 to 10 weeks. What the level of proficiency that you're going to gain is about equivalent to a full year of academic study, which for students that know they really need to increase their proficiency before they then transition into a new project at Florida State or later their career or graduate school, this can be a really excellent opportunity. And it's one that if you start planning early enough in your career, it's one that you can receive multiple times as long as you can continue to articulate how you need to grow in the language or what new skills you need to develop in relation to that study. And it's one that you're eligible for as an undergraduate student, as a master's degree, or as a doctoral level candidate. All of the languages that are eligible for CLS are also eligible for Boren. Boren has a much larger list. So CLS is a little bit more targeted. But as you can see, for many of the languages, no prior experience is required. And so if you, I mean, that doesn't mean you can't during the application cycle and during the spring semester before you would start, download something as simple as Duolingo or an app on your phone, or find coursework at Florida State if it's offered to, to start getting your feet wet. But for some of these other languages that do require 1 year of study, Arabic, Korean, Portuguese, and Russian, you're still eligible to apply. I work with students all the time that have just started their Russian studies in the fall, and they know that they're going to be taking that in the spring as well, and perhaps coupling that with some other cultural classes. You're still eligible to apply because the assumption is that you, by the time you would start your CLS, you will have reached that 1 year proficiency. Now, for some of these other languages, Chinese and Japanese, it does require 2 years of study. However, I've had students that have either opted into that proficiency because they're heritage speakers, or some cases students have done a gap year experience, or they've studied it in high school. And so as long as you can prove that you meet that proficiency, you're eligible. So this is a guideline, but no, there is a little bit of wiggle room there. Anything you'd like to say about the eligibility for some of these languages?
Again, this is fantastic. So the idea, let's say you are interested in Chinese, Mandarin, or Japanese, and you don't have that 2 years yet. Boren, Gilman, other program could be your first dip your toe into the language that way, and then apply to the CLS when you get back for a future year if you have the time for that.
Yeah, and this past spring actually saw the implementation of a brand new program, the CLS Spark program. It was only for Arabic, Russian, and Chinese, I believe. Okay, yeah, and the reason the CLS Spark program was created was really to prioritize access to language study. And so the applicants that were most successful could articulate maybe why they have yet been able to take classes at their undergraduate institution, some of which they can't deviate from their coursework. They only have scholarship funding for these specific courses. Others, their university doesn't even offer. And again, we don't need to get into all of the reasons, but what CLS Spark was hoping to do is that by providing a virtual experience over the summer, because the deadline is going to be mid to late spring, by providing a virtual language study experience through the summer and through the fall, they'll be able to get your proficiency to the point where you would then be eligible for some of these other languages that do require that prior year of study. And if you are selected for CLS Spark, it does guarantee that you will move past that first round of review for CLS to be automatically considered a semifinalist for the CLS if you wanted to continue your language study. So go in and look at the CLS Spark. There are a few more caveats in terms of eligibility and what makes for a competitive application than the CLS program, but it's one that we're really excited to see that program continue to grow. Now, CLS doesn't have that same emphasis on US national security, but again, if that is your career objective, if that's the work that you're wanting to do, you should absolutely find ways to incorporate that into your application. So whereas Boren is going to be 2 800-word essays, CLS is broken down into smaller chunks. And once you create an account, you'll be able to go in and see all of these components. But my usual recommendation for students is that you start with the statement of purpose essay, the one that actually is read last, but by starting with it, I think you can create that overarching argument for your application, why you're studying the language, why you're applying to CLS, and where this program is taking you. And then we can start working into incorporating some of these shorter essays, anywhere from 1 to 350 words, that dig into your experience with the language, that talk about your future plans for studying it, or just other examples from your personal lived experience as a college student, or just in relation to this language. But for all of these, and we didn't really touch on it too much, but we want to make sure that you are as early as possible reaching out to faculty, reaching out to people who can write you letters of recommendation. Obviously, faculty who have worked with you on your language study have seen how committed you are to the language. Those could be excellent letters. Also, faculty or any other staff at Florida State that have experience with you outside of the language, that can speak to your character, speak to your leadership, speak to your maturity, speak to your ability to engage across cultural differences, those can be extremely valuable as well. And when I'm working with students, we really want to, we can understand what's going to be in your essays and what's going to be in your application and how you represent yourself. But then if there are areas that we want to further emphasize, but maybe we don't have room for in the essay, that's where we can start talking about, well, who could provide a really excellent letter of recommendation that might support that? And so we try to think about your application holistically, if that makes sense. And so you can be very targeted with who you reach out to, but you want to reach out to them early so we can give them at least anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks to write this letter, if not longer.
I would jump in here real quick, and Jesse didn't mention this, and I don't know if I'm going to mention it anyway. He reads for the CLS, and this is eventually I hope to have him read for Boren. And the idea of you have somebody who has seen the good, the bad, has been in committees where they talk about what they like, what they didn't, has been through, basically has seen how the sausage is made. That is a wonderful advantage you have over other students who are applying to this program, CLS or what have you. Having that background, having somebody with that inside information, take advantage.
Yeah. And so CLS is going to be due in around like the second week of November, I believe. But like I said, Boren is going to be due until December. So while there are more nuances that we would need to add to that application by starting early, working on a CLS application, perhaps a lot of what you're writing, we can recycle, we can modify, and we can adapt and expand upon for the Boren application. But now, and because I want to make sure that we leave time for questions at the end, and we still have just about like 25 minutes. I'm just going to get through these next opportunities really quickly, and that's not to diminish the value of these experiences, but again, just to get to questions. So the Gilman Scholarship is a fantastic opportunity that is for Pell Grant recipients who are seeking international experiences. And so there's a base level scholarship that's up to $5,000. And that is for a student, again, receiving a Pell Grant that is pursuing any length program abroad. So it could be anywhere from 1 week to a full academic year. Now, if you are planning to study a language, a critical need language is the same list for the CLS scholarship. You can not just opt into an additional $3,000, but it's an award that I think is pretty underapplied to when it comes to Gilman at large. And from my understanding, if you apply to the CNLA and you don't receive it, you're still eligible for the baseline Gilman scholarship. So it's kind of like, this added bonus if you do receive the CNLA. And then the Gilman Scholarship also doesn't require any recommendation letters, which for especially students in their first or second years as they're still building that relationship can be an excellent way to get your feet wet, to be able to build your resume and then become even more competitive for some of these other opportunities that we've been talking about. This one is coming up a little bit quickly than some of the others. It is due October 6th. But the nice thing about Gilman is that you can apply a full year in advance of when your program would start. So this October 6th deadline, that is for any program that's beginning December of this year through, I believe it's Halloween of next year. And so as long as the start date is within that range, the earlier you can apply, usually the less competitive it is, because If you were like me as an undergraduate, if something was due Thursday, I would do Thursday. That's not this. Please apply as early as possible. And if you don't receive it for this first cycle, and say you were planning to study abroad as early as the summer or next fall, you could apply again for the spring deadline in March. So it's also the kind of a 2-for-1 chance to receive funding. So CNLA for Gilman can fund language study, or it can fund any other program as long as you are receiving.
And I'll add, if you were curious if you're not a Pell grantee, but you're not sure what that means, Google it. But you don't have to be currently getting a Pell. If you're eligible for a Pell, you can apply for Gilman, but you're going to have to apply for that Pell grant as well. So it is something that if you're thinking, well, nuts, I'm not a Pell grantee, whatever that is, look up if you are if it is eligible for you. You can still apply to Gilman, but you're going to have to eventually get the Pell also. But it is something to think about, just in case you're already dismissed this program. And what you said already, I'll just say in a different way. Gilman, any kind of scholarship like this, any kind of whether it's merit-based or what have you, these build upon each other. So you get a Gilman, you can then use that experience to help you get the Boren, or help you get a CLS, help you get a Fulbright, help you get a JET, whatever it is you want to do down the road. I've been in lots of different committees, Fulbright committees, Boren committees, JET committees. And we basically see that it's like, oh, this person won a Gilman, oh, this person won a JET, or this person, we see those, and it adds to your to that feasibility that this person is a good pick, because another committee already liked this person and selected them, and it kind of says, hey, 3 other people like this person, why should we not like this person? And it kind of builds on it.
Yeah, I mean, to further emphasize that, a few years ago when I was sitting at one of our national conferences for fellowship advising and study abroad, the then director, I think was still the director of the Fulbright program, asked me directly, how can we get more Gilman scholars to apply for Fulbright fellowships?
Is that Dan?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so Fulbright is, again, we're not going to get into all of the details of it because it's an extremely nuanced award. It can be for academic graduate study, it can be for research, or in this case, creative art projects. But in this case, we're talking about the English teaching assistantship. So it's not it's not like I'm going to this country and I am focused on my study of the language. That opportunity is available. You can still, obviously, being immersed in that culture and in that country is going to increase your proficiency, but this is going to put you in the classroom to be working with students on their language learning. These ETAs exist in a lot of different capacity in different countries. And so some will like South Korea, for example, it's like you will be probably like 40 hours a week. You will be in that classroom working with your student because that's their prerogative. But in another country, you could be in there as low as 12 hours, anywhere from 12 to 15, where you're working with students. And then the rest of your time is focused on a community engagement project of some sort. You have a lot of say in what that looks like. But it's still, again, emphasizing that you are engaging with the language, the culture, the people in some capacity. And so the reason why so this is a talk to us next year because this deadline has, for our campus deadline purposes, has already passed. But this is one, it is of the awards that we've talked about, and I think Bonnie and Christine would second this. It's one of the most rigorous applications that we work with. And so it does necessitate a lot of planning. And then the JET program, which I believe Michael is an alumnus of, and so one that you could, if you would like to speak to it quickly, yeah.
So I was a JET. JET is basically an ETA, but it just run through the Japanese government. The Japanese government hired JET from every English-speaking and some non-English speaking country from around the world. So when I went to JET 22 years ago, I went to Fukushima, and then no one knew where Fukushima was because we hadn't had the earthquake yet. And Fukushima was beautiful, and most JETs are placed in rural areas in Japan. You're teaching English as a second language, but in reality, you're an assistant teacher. So you're working with a Japanese teacher in the classroom. Derisively, some people say you're a human tape recorder, or nowadays a CD player, I don't even know. But basically, you get the Japanese, like most countries, have a national textbook that everybody uses. So from Hokkaido down to Okinawa, everybody has the same English book when they start in middle school. And JET is this opportunity for a Japanese student who would normally not meet a foreigner, a gaijin, until maybe ever, or if they move to a big city, to have someone in their classroom from Ireland, from Scotland, from Wales, from Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada, sit in their classroom, helping them with that pronunciation, helping them out in classroom activities and clubs. It is a wonderful program. It's through the government. the Ministry of Education, Sports and Culture. It used to be called Mambusho. It's called something else now. It pays about $36,000 back in 2020. I don't know if they've increased that, but that is tax-free. So if you have to imagine what you would have to make to get that tax-free, you have, for most part, you get housing taken care of or at least subsidized while you're a jet. It's wonderful. It's a great program. They fly you back and forth to Japan. That application is due in November. Oh, sorry. Yeah, and it's coming up. It is a wonderful opportunity. I can't really talk about Japan anymore because it's so long ago, it's completely changed. But the idea is I can talk to you, should you want, you can email, I may have to give you my personal email because probably Warren would frown on this. But I could tell you basically what we're looking for in the application. The application process in JET is you get one person is going to review it. So that's kind of tight. Normal applications around the world, it's 3 people read your application. In this case, it's one and done. If they like you, if you score enough points, and sometimes you don't even have to like the person, but if they score enough points, if you have enough experience, you will get an interview at the closest Japanese consulate, which I don't know if it's in Tallahassee or if you go to Miami. But the idea is you will then have an interview with the committee, basically say, and they want to make sure that you're just a socially appropriate person to go, you know, that you're not an introvert and that you have this kind of personality. I knew nothing about Japan when I became a jet. I thought I did, but I didn't. But I had some teaching background. I had my master's, or I was completing my master's. All of that got me an interview, but it's the interview that actually gets it for you. Fulbright does Fulbright have an interview?
It depends.
Depends on the interview. Bourne does not have an interview. I do not believe Gilman has an interview. CLS, I don't know.
Nope. Yeah.
So these are one of those that do have an interview, but if you're an outgoing person, it should be fine. And because that's what they want. They want students who are willing to engage with students who are not outgoing. You will be in a room of 40 students and they're all going to have their heads looking right at their desk when you talk to them because they're so shy. They're looking for people to kind of pull students into that conversation. And again, it's funded by the Japan government. It is an experience that like no other. I did it for 2 years. And it was one of my best things I ever did.
Yeah, and what you highlighted, you can do it multiple consecutive years.
I think you can do it now for up to 5 years. Back then, you couldn't do it that long. And when you start looking for work, I don't care what program you do. If you don't get any of these, if you don't apply to any of these, but you still go overseas, in your essay, in your CV, in your resume, I applied for jobs since 2000, since I got born, or 2004. Every job interview I've been on since I got back from Japan. They don't talk about my major. They don't talk about my grades. They don't talk about any of that. All they want to know is, what was it like studying abroad? What did you do in Japan? That tends to be the most, well, these days I don't know, but living overseas for most Americans is just something they've heard of, they've never done. So it tends to be it stands out in the applicant when you're applying for jobs.
Absolutely. EPIC, the English program in Korea, is similar to JET in a lot of ways in terms of its scope and what they're hoping to do, but obviously Korean instead of Japanese. The DOD opportunities, now so DOD has a lot of different experiences in Germany from research to language study. And so we can talk about that spectrum, but yeah, if you are interested in growing in your German proficiency, excellent. But if you're wanting to do research in Germany, you don't need German proficiency because a lot of these labs do operate in English, but maybe that could be a way to start beginning some language study or maybe find your interest there. And then Florida State does have a very specific scholarship, the Maura Binkley Scholarship, which will fund study at Wuppertal University. I believe it's an 8 to 10 week program over the summer, but just for you to grow in your German proficiency. And so that's a scholarship that's partnership between ONF and the Center for Global Engagement. This is our contact information. So obviously, my name is Jesse, and then we talked about Bonnie and Christine in the back. Our director, Dr. Filer, is not here today, but would be happy to meet and chat with you. And so we work with undergraduate students or alumni or students that are soon to graduate. But then we also have Dr. McCall joining us virtually, who works alongside Dr. Stevenson upstairs on the 4th floor of the Honor Scholars and Fellows House. And they work with master's and doctoral level candidates or incoming graduate students. And so they would be happy to talk to you about these fellowships as well. So please feel free to contact, especially for some of these deadlines that may be coming up a little bit more quickly. We would love to meet with you either this week we have availability or as soon as next week. And so now would love for anyone either joining us virtually or in person. If you have questions for Michael, please feel free to ask. I can answer any more technical questions about our office and the work that we do, but thank you all so much for joining us if you do need to leave. But Otherwise, questions?
No question.
Yes.
I kind of wish I knew about this way before, 'cause, I mean, I'm graduating in May. So
Mhm.
I'm like, I don't know if I qualify necessarily for Boren, but I guess just in general for everyone. Are you, when you apply, do you apply to a university for Boren and or CLS? You apply for at a university, through a university, or are you placed as soon as you granted
So,
the scholarship?
The nice thing about CLS is that you apply to a language and they will put you where they have availability. So that's all taken care of for you. But for Boren, unless you're applying to one of the flagship programs, then you have the ability to really choose your own program and opportunity.
Boren is happy, so you're saying Korean, we don't have a Korean flagship, we don't need it because Korean is popular. Most of our flagship languages are for languages that we want to see more people apply to and we're not getting applications. That's a very simple way of putting it, but that is, Korean doesn't need any help, it's already in our top 5 most popular languages. So knowing that, any of the programs that you apply to on your own, we call these self-designed programs, are exactly that. You can find a university program, you can find a private language school, you can find tutoring. It depends where your level is. If your Korean is already at such an advanced level, it's difficult to find a classroom, then maybe tutoring and some sort of one-on-one situation is more appropriate. And you would put into your budget, I'm going to do 20 hours of tutoring a week, plus I'm going to do this, that, and the other. If you are a beginner or intermediate student who would benefit from classroom study, it can be a private school, it can be a university. You do not have to have for Boren have applied yet. You do your research, you talk about it in your application, you will find out whether or not you get the Boren the same time you'll find out about Fulbright, April 15, 2023, if you receive the Boren. That will then let you know whether or not you have to put into the works to get FSU to postpone your graduation until you get back from Korea. But this will give you an opportunity to then start reaching out and say, okay, now I know I'm getting 25,000 or 12,500, depending on which one you get. Now I can start the process of applying to Korean schools. Or language programs. If you do not get the program you talk about in your application, it's fine. They may have filled up, they may no longer exist, whatever the reason. As long as you're getting the same number of Korean hours that you talk about in your application, we're going to be okay. In reality, a lot of times what you write in your application is not going to be what you do on your Boren. Same as your job. What you write in essay 2 about wanting to be a foreign service officer in state, you may end up working for FEMA, for Department of Homeland Security, that actually fulfills your service. That's fine. You're not making a blood vow in your essay 2, but you're basically telling the committee, I've done my research. This is the kind of program I'm looking for. Here are the specifics. After that, it's, there are certain things that you can't control.
We do have a question in the chat that says, since international students are not eligible for these opportunities, do you have any advice or information for similar opportunities where US citizenship is not a requirement?
Depending on your language. So there are opportunities for international students. I was thinking Chinese, Mandarin, we have a couple of things. The Freeman Asia may be eligible for non-US citizens, and there is Soros may or may not be that's a graduate fellowship, may or may not be required citizenship. Any of the government ones will. So Gilman, Fulbright, Boren, these all require citizenship, CLS. After that, you could try, we have a website called IIE Passport. It's all on one word, India Echo Passport.org. You can kind of punch in your language or country that you're interested in and see what comes up. The other thing you can do as an international student is go through your local US Embassy. So if I'm in Colombia, I will go to Bogota, the US Embassy in Bogota's website, and see what opportunities there might be for students in my country that the US would pay for. Those opportunities are different for every embassy. So I have one specifically for Nigeria ready to go, because that's where I get most of my requests from international students for Boren are from Nigeria. So I say, go to the embassy in Lagos and figure out, they have a website. I know where that address is because that one I get a lot. Other countries I don't know. So I don't know what country you're from, but look up the embassy website from your country and see if they have anything for students looking to study either in America or study in general. If you're already an international student sitting in Florida right now, it's gonna be a little different, so.
My recommendation there would be, there's a lot of scholarships and funding and opportunities at Florida State that you just need to be a Florida State student to be eligible for. And so we can also talk about that, like the Moellership program, for example, is something that's run through the Center for Leadership and Social Change. And that's funding for a summer experience. Working with a nonprofit, so there is a specific caveat to that, but it could be for domestic or international experience. And so while the focus may not necessarily be on language study, if you know you're trying to get to a country where that language is predominantly spoken, we can find indirect ways to help you fund that. So so we can look through that opportunity. There's also like the Social Science Scholars Program, depending on your major. That is an excellent opportunity for students and funding through the Center for Global Engagement, through international programs. So we can find scholarships. But yeah. Other questions?
You're doing like flagships, like how many American students like typically come with you, and like where do you live?
Sure. So the flagship language initiative, the FLEAS, the ones that we control, which are most of the Turkish one, for example, in Baku, Azerbaijan. So you will go, in general, you'll be with a cohort of anywhere between 5 and 11 students that will go to University of Wisconsin. You will stay on the dorms there. University of Wisconsin, we're paying for this as part of the program. We'll even, I believe, help you get to Wisconsin as well as from Wisconsin to Baku. That program isn't very big. We deal with small classroom size because that's the best way to teach a language, in my opinion, and most people's opinion. When you go to Baku, you will be with a homestay family. You will be placed with a homestay family. Now, this is our first year overseas currently sending people to Baku. So we will hopefully learn a lot during this. The programs are run by different companies. I think we use American Councils for Baku. American Councils is a program that does a lot of international programs around the world. They have a good reputation. They have a program manager on site, they call their resident director. So the RD will be in charge of making sure that everything is working well on site. We visit these programs to make sure that things are looking good, that it's being run well, which is why we don't have a Portuguese program right now. And the idea is, if there is an issue with any of the homestay families, it goes through the RD. The student says, hey, my homestay family wakes up at 4 in the morning, they're making me pray, or whatever, something that is not kosher. We will then work with the RD and either fix it there or get you a new homestay family. But basically, through the years, our athlete program has a very strong homestay situation because we've been doing it for 10 years. The Baku one will be on its 2nd year. So any bad homestays will be dropped and we will get new people to do it for the year 2 or year 3, what have you. It gets better every year. But that's generally speaking, you'll be with a homestay family, you'll be close to campus, you will then be with the same students you were with in Wisconsin, and it's a cohort. After the program ends, which is usually late November, early December, it is up to you whether you stay in Azerbaijan and continue studying Turkish or you go home. Either way, you're going to talk about that in your application. But that's generally speaking how it works.
It's also one of the major values for like the critical language scholarship, for example, and why you gain so much proficiency during that experience is because you're not just getting the formal classroom study, but usually through a homestay, you're getting it in that capacity. And then you also have a language partner that you're paired with for the time that you're there. So you're getting the language in so many different forms. So it makes sure that you are immersed in it throughout your time there. They also make you sign a contract that you won't use English. It's
A pledge.
Yeah, right, a pledge.
And if you apply for the FLEAS through Boren, definitely you're going to want to talk to us about there's one section of your application where you talk about the program you're applying for. And if you are in a SAFLE committee, everybody's applying to the same program. So the key here is not talking about the program specifically because everybody is doing the same thing. It's going to get boring. Talk about why the program fits your personality, fits your interests, and fits your career path. This is why I'm applying for SAFLE. This is why I'm applying for IFLE or TERFLE, because it meets this requirement I'm looking for. I'm looking for this kind of long-term, very structured language intent because I know I want to be a foreign service officer or whatever I want to be in the government. This kind of language proficiency is going to help me get my foot in the door and get me a job at agency X, right? you were making it more about you versus just explaining something that the committee already knows.
Any advice for applicants who do not have academic background in the language, who are just
Sure.
want to jump into this
Sure, so
curiosity interest?
so it depends what your goals are for federal government, what your major is. You're in museum studies in that genre, right? Being more familiar with the culture may be important to what you want to do in the federal government, or at least what you want to do career-wise. If Korean is offered at FSU, if you just started taking it or you plan to start taking it in the spring, you talk about that in your application. If it's not offered at FSU, you talk about, I'm very interested in the language and in the culture. My school doesn't offer this. Bourne is my opportunity to study. You're telling the committee basically, you give me this award, or else what else am I going to do, right? You're giving them, it makes it even harder for them not to select.
Yeah, I think even, because sometimes I work with students that, I think one of the best things you can do for a committee is paint as clear of a picture, even if it's an educated guess, as to where you hope to be and what you hope to be doing. Because like Michael said, it's not a blood oath. It's not like they will check in on you in like 12 months and like, okay, did you do that thing? You know, but, and so I guess when it comes to museum studies, you know, or your speciality within that is, what does that look like? What is like the specific area of art that you are wanting to prioritize or study, or what are the communities that you're wanting to bring into the museum or to share this information with? I think that could be really helpful.
So I was an American Studies major and I did museum studies.
Oh,
So
yeah.
how would I make a boring argument for a museum studies major is talk about the commitment right now. Countries like the US and England specifically, I'm not even going to say UK, and France are having this conversation, and you very well know what this is, or where I'm going with this. We have all this stuff that was we accumulated in by sometimes weird ways, you know, weird, I'm going to put an asterisk on it.
Suspicious.
It's suspicious. It fell off a truck. We in England, the British Museum is one of the classic ones on this. But there's this big conversation going on about when do we give this stuff back? Should we be even having this? We have bones in our display case that probably should never have been moved and shouldn't be there. And my God, is it really still there? That is definitely an international argument for museum study major being interested in working in the Smithsonian or somewhere within, because Smithsonian is a government position, which is hard to, and you're going to sell that a lot easier to the committee who's going to be skeptical of it. Why does a museum studies person want to work for the federal government? This is a big deal. This is a huge soft diplomacy, possibly not so soft, depending on how it goes, when countries are like, hey, we want our stuff back. And that is tricky on so many different levels. And museums are hesitant to give their stuff back. So anyway, that is something that you could decide to go that direction.
Actually, Florida State Study Center in London, I think, is 2 blocks away from the British Museum. And I never really truly understood the scope until I was walking through their Egyptian section, where I was just like, oh dear.
Oh dear.
Yeah, oh dear. But other questions for today for Michael about the fellowships, any like maybe specific fellowship, anything about Boren? Be happy to talk about it. Yeah.
The Turkish, what's it called, Live program, what's the success rate like?
We just had our first year where we actually had the entire program. Send me an email, because I don't know the numbers off my head. I know it's been last year, the last 3 years are tough to judge anything because of COVID. Like we had a 50-odd% success rate for everything last year because we had so few people apply. It was a great year to apply. And I think that those numbers are going to go up this year, but they're not going to be at our normal record numbers. So this is still a great time to apply to a Boren, a CLS, or anything else. I think there will be a surge. I think there's a lot of pent up interest in study abroad. Our numbers, God forbid, our numbers are as low as they were last year. But the idea is any number I give you that for Turfleet, our official Turkish program, is going to be weird because we don't know if those numbers are true yet. We haven't had years and years to look at. I can tell you overall, our Turkish numbers are also weird because we stopped going to Turkey, which really lowered our numbers, which is why we had Turfleet in the first place. We want to make sure people know you can still apply it to Turkish on Boren in Azerbaijan. You don't have to do the Turfleet program. You can do your own program. But the numbers can't be terrible. I would assume the numbers are similar to somewhere in between AFLI and IFLI, where we're looking at a 35 between 35% and 55% acceptance rate would be my guess. That's just my educated guess. It's still pretty high for a national award. And it gives you roughly almost 25,000 in funding. I mean, we pay for everything ourselves, so you don't really get necessarily a say where the money goes, because you're paying for Wisconsin, you're paying for Baku, the program we're doing in Baku. So some of the money is like I think we get your tickets ahead of time, so you don't get money for the ticket. We're already giving it to you. I don't know how it all works with these, but the idea is you out of pocket, your costs are very low for our fleas. The only option, the only difference with this, the caveat is if you're applying for South Africa, for Ghana, or you're applying for Wolof in Senegal, you have to talk to me, because it's a completely different situation. But for everybody else, the budget is pretty easy because we take care of most of it.
Well, I think we're running like 5 minutes over.
Did anybody have a country that they were interested in? You can throw up on the comments, who's online, who didn't hear their country specifically mentioned. We got Korea, we got China, we got Jordan. Again, Arabic, #1 language for graduate students, #2 language for undergrads. Jordan is wonderful. I recommend Jordan.
Yeah.
Marhaba. Marhaba, it's Turkish, right? So it's very close. Anybody else? All right, Jordan, love it.
Thank you all so much for coming today.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you so much for joining virtually. I know this is going to be an excellent recording to share with our students. And
I know
excellent
Scott,
resources.
as the Japanese would say, nobody is applying for Japanese, but
Yeah.
it was fun.
Yeah, and I would be happy to put you in contact with Michael should you have any further questions or anything that comes up after this. But, thank you all.
Thanks, guys.